Hey y'all, howdy, welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell, and this is my 5-star predictions reading vlog. I am so stoked about this, potentially more than any other content I'm gonna do all year, because I have been looking forward to reading these books for so long. I have 3 books that I'm going to read for this vlog. I've been putting them off. I don't know why. They've all been out for a while now. And I just knew when I heard about these books that I was going to love them. So, book number 1 is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Stormlight Archive, which, if not his most popular, is definitely his most beloved series. I have read 2 other series by Brandon Sanderson. I read Mistborn Era 1 and Mistborn Era 2. I absolutely loved Mistborn Era 1. It was a trilogy. It was fantastic. Mistborn Era 2 took place 300 years later. It was 4 books. I didn't enjoy that as much because it was a bit more of a Western style story. The central character in that one was a detective, and I generally am just not as into detective type mystery stories, but I still had a really good time with it. The Stormlight Archive I have been looking forward to for so long, but I've been putting it off because the 5th and final book of Stormlight Archives Era 1 comes out in December this year, and I didn't want to get into such a huge series. I think all of the books in the series are over 1,000 pages long, and I didn't want to read it and then forget everything and have to reread it before the next book came out. So the time is now. I am starting, and I am reading this along with Venus Escapes to Read over on her channel. She's announced a Stormlight Archives read along, and so I'm reading at the same pace as her so I can participate in the discussions over on her channel, which I will link down below. So I'll come back to this in just a moment because I have already started it and have thoughts. So the second book for this series is going to be Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have read literally everything else that R.F. Kuang has put out. Then in 2022, Babel came out, and I heard nothing but amazing things about it, and I bought it on ebook, and for some reason just never read it. Now is the time. Babel is a dark academia fantasy novel where I believe that the magic is based around linguistics, and I've heard that it is a narrative of colonialism and how academia and racism have played into the power structures that the main character has to deal with. So all of that sounds amazing. I've heard nothing but fantastic things about it, and I can't wait to dive in. And then finally, the third book for this reading vlog is going to be The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Last year, I read the Daevabad trilogy by Shannon Chakraborty, which was absolutely my favorite fantasy series that I read last year, and probably one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. So to say I am excited to pick up a new series by this author is definitely an understatement. The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi, from what I understand, is about a retired lady pirate who used to be a super badass, but she's in her 40s now. She has a daughter, and so she is living a quiet life. And then she gets some sort of offer she can't refuse and has to get the band back together for like one final mission or adventure or what have you. So I just love the idea of that. I was a super fan of Pirates of the Caribbean when I was a kid, and so I just am excited for a book that gives me those vibes, and I'm excited for older lady pirate adventures. So those are the 3 books. Let's start with The Way of Kings. Today is March 1st. I started this probably 3 days ago, and I'm currently on page 230 out of 1,005. So I'm about 25% of the way in. It's funny because I've heard so many people talk about this book, but no one has ever really talked about what it's about, or they say it's like too complicated to talk about what it's about. I can definitely see how that is true because already so much has happened and there are so many characters. I'm actually, because I'm doing this like as a read along and everything, I've been like keeping notes to myself just so I can like remember important things and important characters as we go along. My absolute favorite thing about this so far is that the world feels so magical and unique. And I think with so many fantasy stories, it's kind of the same old, where It's kind of like our world, but medieval and with some like elves and dwarves and magic, or you know, some variation of that. And this feels completely different. It doesn't feel like our world. Everything about it is magical. There are magical plants, there are magical rocks, there are magical creatures, and they're not elves and dwarves and things like that we already know, right? They're completely new things. The climate is completely different. The culture is completely different. The norms and taboos are completely different. The human societies are just vastly different from any that I have ever read before. I have never felt so excited to be immersed in a completely new world. I mean, it's hard to say, like 230 pages into a 1,000-page book, but so far I'm feeling really optimistic that this could definitely be a 5-star because I am just loving the world so much. There's been, like I said, a lot of different characters, but thus far, at least in part 1, the main characters were a man named Kaladin and a woman named Shallan. So Kaladin starts off the story. He is a soldier and he is a squad leader, and he is really good at this. His soldiers really respect him, and he wants to gain enough renown within the army that he's in that he can be sent to a region called the Shattered Plains, where the king is fighting a completely separate army. And so basically he wants to gain enough renown in this small army doing small skirmishes that he can be a part of the king's army. And then the next time we see Kaladin, it is 8 months later, and he has been enslaved. He is no longer a soldier. According to the slave trader, he was branded as a deserter from the army. We find out that that is not true, but we don't know how he was captured or what actually happened that led to these events. Kaladin is taken to the king's army, but as a enslaved person instead of as a soldier. And so what he wanted happens, but not the way that he wanted it to happen, obviously. And his duties as a slave are absolutely horrific, and he kind of loses all hope. So that's kind of how Kaladin's story kicks off, which is a really interesting way to build up a character. The other interesting thing about Kaladin's story is that in this world, there are things called sprins, which are basically like little spirits, I think. And there's like glory sprins and death sprins and blood sprins and laughter sprins, and they're basically just like little spirits that pop up in response to like either natural events or human emotions. There is a wind sprin that normally, you know, shows up when the wind is very strong. But unlike other wind sprin, it has a personality and it is following Kaladin around. It has a name for itself. It knows things that no other, you know, most sprins are kind of, they don't really have thoughts and feelings. They're more just instinctual creatures. But the fact that this one is discovering new truths and that it has feelings for itself is something that it's trying to figure out and that Kaladin is really befuddled by. But this wind sprin is following him around and talking to him, and he's the only one that can see it, which is really interesting. The second main character here in part 1 is called Shallan, and she is a woman from a noble family. Her father has recently passed away, but unfortunately her father left their family in significant debt. And so her and her brothers decide not to tell anyone that their father has died until they can do something about it, because if people find out that her father's dead, they're going to come collecting on the debts and their family will be ruined. But they have no way to come about this money ethically. So Shallan's goal is to become a ward of the princess, who is a well-known scholar. And basically, once she gets in good with the princess, she wants to steal the princess's like magical ring, which she believes she can use to save her family's estates. There goes my shade. So when the story kicks off, Shallan has been chasing the princess around on a boat. She's been, you know, showing up at cities where she thinks the princess is, and then when she gets there, she finds out the princess has already moved on to the next city. And so she's just been on this journey for like 6 months trying to track down the princess. And she finally does, and the princess rejects her outright as a potential apprentice, basically because she says she is not learned enough and that her education is lacking. But Shallan is really persistent and comes at her again and again, and basically on the third attempt, she impresses the princess enough that she agrees to take her on as her ward. So that's the main thing of what's happened so far, but there is so much more going on. At the very beginning, like, a king was assassinated, and there's some really amazing magic in here. There's lots of different characters that we're following, so I'm not really sure what the overall narrative is going to be, but so far it's a lot about war and family politics. So really having a good time. Can't wait to read more. I will try to keep this vlog as spoiler-free as possible. So that's the kickoff of our 5-star predictions reading vlog. I'm so excited. I'll also be including some snippets of life throughout. Right after I started The Way of Kings, my husband and I went and explored a wild cave called Parks Ranch Cave in New Mexico. And so I have some clips of that I'll share with you guys before I dive into the next reading update. Right now we are at the Oregon Mountains in New Mexico, and it is March 1st, the kickoff of the vlog. I'm so excited. So hang around if you want to see my thoughts on these 3 incredible books. I finished The Way of Kings. I thought about checking in earlier than this in the book, maybe at like the halfway point or something, to talk about my feelings about it, but honestly my feelings really didn't change. I was excited and happy to be reading this the whole way through. There was some slower parts, but there was never anything that I was bored of, and all of the characters were super cool. All of their plot lines were super interesting, and I was just like really jazzed to be in this world the whole time I was reading it. So I think I talked about the 2 characters at the beginning of the book, Kaladin and Shallan. In part 2, there's the kind of what I would consider the 3rd main character is introduced, which is High Prince Dalinar, and he is the uncle of the king. He becomes kind of the 3rd part of the tripod of this book, I think. The kingdom is at war. Dalinar is obviously an advisor to the king, but also a warrior and a general, and he is becoming more and more unreliable, or at least that's what people think of him, because during all of the high storms, which are these crazy massive storms that rock this world frequently, he basically has a fit and starts shaking and shouting nonsense, and that's what everyone else sees. And in his mind, he's seeing these really intense, very realistic visions of the past, of the history of their country, and he doesn't know whether these visions are being sent to him from the Almighty, the Creator, or if he is literally just going mad. And so he doesn't really know whether to trust himself, but he still has so many responsibilities, and really like the interplay and the struggle that he goes through about whether he should still be leading men, whether he should still be in charge of things, whether or not these visions are true, and whether he can trust them. It's so good. In the very last, you can see, obviously, there were lots of things in this book that I found very quotable or inspiring, or just thought was like really like pieces of writing that I wanted to cling on to. Yeah, the end of this book is pretty classic. I really got to understand what people talk about when they say the Sanderlanche, because Brandon Sanderson is apparently very well known for having just like reveal after reveal after reveal after big moment after big moment after big moment, like at the very end of a book that's just been built and built and built and built towards. And so I really got the feel for that in part 5. Part 5 is really only like, I don't know, is it like the last 50 pages of the book or something? It's a very short section, but it's just like a lot of payoff, like back to back to back, where you get like big reveals about things that have been mysterious the whole book, and also just like big anticipatory things for the next book to come. And I just thought it ended really well. The middle was super solid, like all of this. There was just like a really intense betrayal at the climax of the book, and seeing how some of the character storylines like started to interweave was super fascinating. This was absolutely a 5-star read. I'm just so stoked. This was a great start to the vlog. Like, a 5-star, like, yes, a 5-star book to start off our 5-star vlog. Like, we're killing it. We've got 2 books to go. I'm actually took really extensive notes about this book, because I'm thinking, you know, these books are obviously chonkers, and the 5th book is coming out at the end of December or mid-December. It's coming out in December this year. And so I was thinking of, since I'm reading these for the first time this year, doing either one long video or 4 shorter videos where I do an intense, like, spoilery breakdown of like everything you need to remember before book 5 of Stormlight. So if you're interested in that, please let me know in the comments below, and let me know whether you would rather it be 4 shorter videos or 1 long video, because I doubt everyone is going to have time to reread all 4 of these books before the next one comes out, and I think that would be a fun video to do, or videos. So anyway, can't wait to get to the next one, but for now we're going to dive into something else, and that is going to be The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I'm really jazzed about it. My library hold has already come in. I think I will most likely own this book in the future, but I just have not been anywhere where there are bookstores in a very long time. So yeah, I have my ebook checked out from the library, and I'm so excited to dive into that, probably right after I finish filming this clip. So really high hopes. It's got a lot to live up to after just reading The Way of Kings. Maybe I shouldn't have started the vlog with such a beloved book, but I feel like both of the other books have been super beloved as well, and that's part of the reason I'm so hyped about them and feel so much anticipation. So all that being said, life lately has been really great. Today I went to the Chiricahua Desert National Monument with my parents, and that was really beautiful and amazing, and I'll insert some video clips from that. Right now I'm at a place called Indian Bread Rocks Recreation Area, hence the rocks that you can see here. This has been a really fun place to stay, and good vibes all around. My birthday is coming up soon. This is my birthday month. My husband and I have been traveling with my parents for almost a month now. They also live in a more full-size camper, but they're going to be heading back east probably in the next week or so, and my husband and I are continuing to head west. It's been really great being able to travel with them. My dad plays guitar, and he's super talented, and so he's actually providing the soundtrack for all of the music in this vlog are original songs written and recorded by my dad. So yeah, please enjoy the sweet musical tunes as I share some of the beautiful footage of the places I've been lately. And I will check in with you guys once I either have first impressions or maybe halfway mark impressions from Amina Al-Sirafi. All right, y'all. It's time for the Amina Al-Sirafi check-in. I am officially, this is my Kindle, and I'm officially 50% of the way through the book. And yeah, I'm definitely getting 5-star vibes, at least from the first book. Of course, you know, the ending definitely is gonna make a huge difference. But I'm loving the aged lady pirate vibes. This has been such a fun read so far. And so basically the premise is this lady pirate is retired. She has a young daughter now, but she was once like the biggest badass to ever roam the seas, and she's very well known. And so she's trying to kind of live a very reclusive lifestyle. But the mother of one of her old shipmates tracks her down and tells her that her granddaughter has been kidnapped and that she will pay her a exorbitant sum of money, basically, to go rescue her granddaughter. So Amina goes and tries to kind of get the old band back together. So it kind of starts off similar to like a heist premise, which I definitely love, but it is like getting together all these experts that she hasn't seen in like 10 years, you know, trying to convince them to come on this last harebrained scheme with her. And things quickly get out of hand. One of the first crewmates that she goes to try and recruit is basically being arrested as she comes up on him. And so things just like get more and more twisty and out of hand as it goes along. And the kidnapping is not as straightforward as it seems either. The granddaughter who was kidnapped is apparently really into the occult and like magical artifacts, and potentially that's the reason that she was kidnapped in the first place. And so very quickly Amina is kind of in over her head, or this like simple job that she took on is not nearly as simple as she expected. I'm really digging it so far and having a really great time. Something big was just revealed here at the 50% mark, or a new character was introduced that feels really like angsty. Like this is a very angsty moment in the book, so I can't wait to dive back in after I'm done filming this clip. And yeah, I will let you guys know my final thoughts once I've finished the book. I finished Amina Al-Sirafi last night. So second book in a row for this vlog that I stayed up late to finish, which if you know anything about me, that's a really rare occurrence. I really value my sleep and don't normally stay up late to finish books. Even if I'm pretty close to the end, I'm like, that can wait till tomorrow. So Amina Al-Sirafi was spectacular, 5 stars. This vlog is killing it. I'm so stoked to like have anticipated these books for so long and them still to be like living up to my expectations, which is a feat for sure. But Amina was just like the perfect like swashbuckling pirate adventure. There was tentacled sea monsters, there was evil sorcerers, a treasure hoard, a magical quest, just like all the things that you want out of a great pirate tale. You know, as a millennial who grew up in love with the original Pirates of the Caribbean movie, this is just like exactly what I want out of a pirate book. But it's so much more than that too, because it's a very feminist tale, and below the kind of flashy exterior plot, there's a lot of conversations about motherhood and the sacrifices that women make for their children, as well as the sacrifices they make in order to pursue their own dreams. And I just loved Amina's crew. I loved Amina. I just really didn't want to put it down. I think yesterday when I started the day, I had read about 60% of the book, and I read the last 40% of the book in one day. So it was super compelling, and I just loved every second of it. I think the setup for the next two books is super intriguing, and I can't wait to continue Amina's adventure whenever the second and third book of the trilogy do come out. There was also a overlap in a character from the Daevabad trilogy. I won't reveal who, but that was pretty fun. And I also thought it was fun that, you know, because she is, I forget if this was like the year 1200 or something, obviously a very long time ago, and she's a pirate in the Indian Ocean, and she sails into all these different ports. And I'm very unfamiliar with the geography of that part of the world, and so it was fun for me to like Google each time like where these places were and to find out that they actually were real places. So that was a super fun aspect of it as well. So it's going great, which is honestly making me even more nervous to dive into book number 3, but we're starting that today. And the next book, of course, is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I've read both The Poppy War and Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which are her other 4 books that she has published currently, and I loved all of them. So my hopes are very, very high, and Babel got a ton of hype the year that it came out. So let's see if we can keep the bar at the ceiling for the third and final book of this vlog, and I will check in with you guys after I have first impression or halfway impressions on Babel. I'm in a really pretty place to film outside, but it is so windy that I could not film out there. So just wanted to check in. I am currently 49% of the way through Babel by R.F. Kuang, and it is very, very good so far. I'm not quite sure that I'm getting 5-star vibes yet. It's definitely 4, potentially even 4.5, depending on the ending, 4.75 even, but it's not giving me like, it's just a very serious book, and so I'm not having like the fun that I was having when I was reading Amina or The Way of Kings. That's not a mark against this book. It's not trying to be a fun book. It's dark academia. So maybe I'll change my mind like once the book has settled a little bit more. But basically the book is exactly, I think, as I explained in the first clip, where there is a young boy named Robin, or at least that's his adopted English name. He is from China, and his family, like in the opening scene, his family has all died of a plague, and he is dying himself, and a white man comes in and saves him, and he finds out this man has been his sponsor that was providing his language tutors since he was very, very small. And he takes him back to England and trains him up to be a linguistic scholar so that he can get accepted into the Babel Institute at Oxford. Robin comes to find that this man is actually his father, but won't accept him as his son because he is obviously Chinese and this man is white, and it's like 1830s England or what have you, and he just doesn't accept him as who he is. So there's lots of like understated kind of familial drama and racism. But Robin does get accepted into Oxford. He is a student at Babel. And this is important because language in this world is the magic system, or translation is the magic system. And so the magic is based on what's lost in translation, because there are very few things in languages that are like a one-to-one comparison, like a one-to-one word. Like chocolate, for instance, is like something that's like, you can pretty much say chocolate and mean exactly the same thing in every language. But like if you say something like the word understand in English, then it's something a little bit different in Chinese. Like it might mean to understand, but it might also have connotations of like to illuminate or to make clear. And so when people translate between these two things, something is lost in translation, correct? So the magic system is these like little silver bars, and if they inscribe a word on one side in English and on another side in a different language, these they're called match pair words. Whatever is lost in translation creates this magical effect. And so for the example I just gave, like it might create illumination or energy of some kind. At this point in the 49% mark, they're already fourth years, so it goes through their freshman, sophomore, junior year already. And R.F. Kuang does a good job, I think, of showing how this world is very different from actual historical England because of the importance of magic and silver and how that has changed kind of the way that the trading and colonialism has worked. Pretty much everything is based around silver. It's like the main part of the British economy. They're still the like huge British power that they are, but even to a greater degree because they have the best linguistics and translation institute in the world. So right in Robin's first semester at Babel, he gets recruited into a secret society, which I think is a theme of all dark academia books, that there's like some sort of secret society involved. This one is called the Hermes Society, and it is a group of people, usually former students or translators, who are trying to steal silver and other materials from Babel, the tower at Oxford, in order to distribute them to companies that are being taken advantage of by the British Empire, and basically trying to like offset the cost of like all these wars and all these terrible things that Britain is doing to these countries that don't have the economic systems and power structures that Britain does to support itself. So it's all very interesting. Robin has a group of like 3 other friends in his grade that they're really close, and they study and have all these classes together. And it's been really fun seeing like that group interact together, and it definitely reminds me of like being in college and like the fun times juxtaposed with the really intense studying and the pressures that you feel and things like that. So I think the college/academia vibes in this book are like super spot on. The magic system is really cool. I'm also really enjoying all of the talk around language and linguistics and translation. I've always been fascinated by that kind of stuff. So I'm really just enjoying all aspects of this book, but I'm just not as compelled to like keep reading it or keep picking it up as I was with the first 2 books in this vlog. That's where we are right now. I will update you guys again once we have finished Babel. Life-wise, we are in a wildlife management area in southern Arizona right now, and yesterday we saw a bobcat, which I'm just so stoked about. I have never seen a bobcat alive and in person before, so that was really, really exciting. And we actually saw it pretty up close. And then on the drive here, we actually saw 4 javelinas as well. So I'll insert some clips of that and share with you guys some of our awesome wildlife encounters we've had lately. And I will see you again soon. All right, y'all. Last clip of the vlog because I finished Babel this morning. But as I'm sure you saw from the last set of B-roll, we also went and saw Dune Part 2, which I have to talk about. If I had thought about it in advance, I would have just included that as part of the 5-star predictions, because I absolutely would have predicted that Dune Part 2 would have been a 5-star, and it was. I have read Dune by Frank Herbert at least twice, maybe 3 times. Unfortunately, I have never continued on with the sequels because, as any fan of Dune will tell you, they get progressively weirder to the point of absurdity. However, I have heard that at least the first 3 are worth reading, and potentially further than that before they actually get into the realm of beyond. Anywho, long story short, I love Dune, and I was really excited for the movie adaptation. I reread it previous to Part 1 coming out several years ago, and I was really, really pleasantly surprised with Dune Part 1. I thought it followed the book very, very closely and brought kind of the epicness to the story that previous adaptations have not achieved. So I was very optimistic going into Dune Part 2, and I am so happy to say that it lived up to all of my expectations. In Dune Part 2, there's definitely a shift away from the precise following of the book, but I don't think that those were bad decisions. I think Chani was made into a much more interesting character, which is Paul's kind of girlfriend from Part 1, if you've seen it or if you've read the book. I thought she was given a lot more depth, which was not present in the book. I also thought that the way Paul's little sister was portrayed on screen was the right decision. In the book, she's like a very creepy 3-year-old who has the brain processes of an adult and can speak like a normal adult. And in order to do that in a movie, they would have had to use a lot of CGI. I'm not sure that it would have come off very well. It would have been very creepy, and she is creepy, like that is part of it, but I just think it would have brought the movie from really wowing to people who were not fans to like a little bit silly, and I don't think that's the direction that was right for this adaptation. So I think they did a good job making the choices they did portraying his sister the way that it was portrayed in Part 2. They also left out the spice orgy, which I think was a good call. But in all the ways that really matter, Dune Part 2 stayed true to the story. It's still, I think, a very faithful adaptation, and really, I think, made this story shine on screen for both previous fans of the novel and brand new fans who are just going in for the movie experience. So I'm just so stoked that it was so good. The sandworms were depicted so well. Paul's scene with the sandworm in Dune Part 2 was just so freaking epic. Like, I was literally like, I think my mouth was open like in the theater. I was just like so stoked about it. We went to see it in IMAX, and just feeling like the ornithopters thumping in my chest. This is definitely a movie you have to see in theater if you are even thinking about it, if you're a fan at all. It was just everything I want out of a theater experience, and I'm so glad that the adaptation was done so well, and I wish that every adaptation could be this epic. But let's move on to Babel, because my feelings on it definitely changed after the 50% mark. Speaking of epic, I feel like this book got a lot more epic and a lot more involved and a lot more action-packed after the halfway point. Pretty much at the halfway point, I think, is when Robin and his cohort are sent on like their senior trip, basically, and senior trips can go a lot of different places, but they're basically given some like translation responsibilities. They go to foreign countries, and it's usually some sort of diplomatic type of mission. And on this one, they're sent to Canton, which is the city in China where Robin is from, and he sees the impact of the opium trade that Britain is pushing very heavily into China so that they will trade silver with them. It really kind of throws into stark light all of these underlying things that he's felt all the time about how Britain is basically becoming a superpower at the expense of the well-being of everyone else in the world. And this kind of move is what finally really radicalizes Robin, this trip does. And so from there, we spiral deep into dark academia territory, which, like I said, I have never read another dark academia book, but pretty much the two things I could have told you about them were they're based in universities, there's some sort of secret society involved, and a murder of some kind or death. Mysterious death happenings. So after the 50% mark, we get not only one murder, mysterious death, but multiple. It escalates so quickly into an absolutely devastating ending. And it was so good. I was really gripped the last half of the book. I was much more interested in it. It wasn't just their daily lives at the university mixed in with some secret society business. It like went all the way there. And I was super there for it. The messages that this book was portraying were in some cases very blunt, but I don't think that was for the worse. I think it was very concisely and clearly stated what the author was trying to say, and that it was done really well. This book was amazingly well researched. I just have so much respect for Rebecca Kuang after reading this. All of the talk around language and linguistics and translation was just all very fascinating. The characters' motives were very believable. Their internal struggles felt like real people's struggles. And even though, you know, it obviously escalated into dark academia madness, I think the book foreshadowed really well where all of it was going, but I was still surprised. I mean, honestly, the book tells you, like, from the get-go, like, that this is a history of XYZ events that happened at Oxford, and still I was, like, not expecting it to go there. So my expectations were met, exceeded, carried away into the horizon. I actually, reading the very last line before the epilogue, I was like, I didn't cry, but I was like, like, oh God, what a hard-hitting like note to end the book on. I am so happy to have finally read this. Like I said previously, it wasn't like the fun 5 stars that I got from the previous 2 books in this blog, but it was absolutely a 5-star read, and one that I would highly recommend to anyone who thinks this sounds interesting. I think the messages were really important, and like I said, if at sometimes they were bluntly applied, it was still artfully applied. So I guess to wrap up this vlog, my predictions are apparently impeccable. Like, I know my taste super well. I knew I was gonna love all these books, and I absolutely loved all of these books. So yeah, I ended up with 4 5-star experiences out of a 3-book reading vlog. So honestly, just killing it. I'd love to do more of these in the future, I think. Let me know if you guys had a good time with this, or what you'd like to see done differently out of future 5-star prediction vlogs. My parents and I have unfortunately finally split ways. We ended up traveling with them for a little over a month, but they're headed back east and we are continuing to head west. We had a great time hanging out with them the whole time, and this has just been a really fun vlog to do to kind of commemorate part of that experience. Even though they weren't featured in it too heavily, this will just be fun for me to look back on to remember these times. So thank you all so much for tuning in and hanging out with me. I'm sure this ended up being quite long, but I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, because these books were fantastic. And I hope that if you haven't already read them, that you're inspired to pick up at least one of them. And if you have already read them, please let me know what you thought of them down in the comments below. I'll see you again soon with another video. Please subscribe, be kind, and I'll see you again soon.